Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to SwiftSlots. Now I'm no Scalextric's historian, so forgive me if I get my facts just a little bit wrong, but the overarching topic will be vaguely correct. Now during the 70s, as we know, Scalextric made the classic Mini. We've all seen it, I own multiples now, and so on and so forth. Now we all know that those cars had questionable handling, mostly or partly due to the very floppy front axle. Now 40 years on from that, all the brands have learnt floppy front axles don't really work. Everybody knows it, even Scalextric no longer make floppy front axles. Kinda. So, brings us up to date. Scalextric have brought out a brand new Mini and also the 1275 GT. I believe they're exactly the same car. So this video will hopefully cover the standard width Mini, the wide arch Mini as in this one, and also the 1275 GT, hopefully. So anyway, my point is, they've done it again. They didn't learn from history that floppy front axles are not good. And they put the floppy front axle in the Mini and the 1275 GT. Now the logic behind that is that there's not enough body in front of the front axle, so the pivot for the guide has to go between the front axles. And that is what all of the reviewers say, and that's generally the reason why, because there's not enough room in front of the axle to put the guide. Wrong. I've always thought that's wrong because it's wrong. So what I did is I bought a Mini. Now I didn't just buy any old Mini, I got a SwiftTune Mini. I had to. It's Swift 16 and SwiftSlots. I had to get a SwiftTune Mini. So I did. Now I really wanted the BRM one, but I couldn't afford the BRM one, and this job would be pointless on the BRM one because it doesn't have the problem that this one does. Anyway, I digress. I bought a SwiftTune Mini to do on SwiftSlots. So what I've done is I've solved all the problems of this car. That being, I've moved the guide forward of the front stub axles, and I've now got a solid axle conversion for this car. And I've also taken out all the weight at the roof and the interior. So I've made a vacuum formed glass and a vacuum formed interior. So this car's interior weighs approximately 15 grams. It depends on if you have the driver and co-driver or just the single driver like this one here. This one's probably a little bit less because this is the single driver, but I know that the double driver or driver and co-driver with the glass weighs about 15 grams. And I've managed to remove all that weight and get a vacuum glass set and interior down to 2 grams. So in this video I'm going to show you the parts that I've made to turn this car into the car it always should have been. It's a beautiful little car. Scalextric have done a wonderful job of modelling this car. They really do look beautiful, but they're flawed. So we're going to address that. So first of all, we need to see just how well this car actually runs as it is straight out the box. Now, slight caveat, this car is supposed to be magnet traction for a metal track. Crow Valley is an MDF track. It's a little bit unfair to put a magnet car onto an MDF track because the car has to run so much better when it's running on MDF than if it does have to when it's on a magnet track, because you don't have the magnet to pull it down. Now a magnet hides problems with handling, and this car is hiding some skeletons in its cupboard. Oh my, is it? It is dreadful. And it wouldn't be so bad if the mechanics in it were running nicely and they're around and everything else, and it just had its handling quirks because it hasn't got the magnet. But this isn't that. This thing jumps around and it complains, and it's just dreadful to get around the track. You'll see from this track run now. So let's play the track run, and then I'll get you on my table and I'll show you what I've done, and then we'll get what parts I've made, and then we'll get on the workbench and we'll turn this car into the car it really always should have been. So let's get to Crow Valley and let's watch this car crash of a run. Okay, so let's look at this wonderful little car. Now it's wonderful from an aesthetic point of view. It's not wonderful from a performance point of view. So there we are. But it's absolutely fantastic little car. Scalextric really have done a very, very nice job on modelling this car. Now, although it doesn't handle very well, it does look absolutely fantastic on track, and it's such a shame that it doesn't handle all that well, because if it handled well and looked this good, you would really be onto a winner. But that's the point of this video. We can make this car handle beautifully, and we will. So here is the problem that we've got. All that horrible slop, totally unsupporting the front of this car. Also, this car has got some very out of round wheels. It hops like crazy. Now maybe the wheels are out of round, or maybe the tyres are out of round. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, it's got some problems. Now if we trued these tyres and ran it round the track, maybe we could get a much better performance out of it. But I think we can do something better anyway. But for guys that are interested in this video, you might be able to true these back wheels as they are. Now I've actually fitted a whole one of these back axles in my SwiftSlots tyre truer, and it fits absolutely fine. So you can take this whole axle out, true these tyres, no problems at all, and that might actually be an answer. But I'm not going to go down that path in this video. I'm actually going to do something slightly different on the back end, but we'll just see how that all pans out, because I'm not quite sure where I'll be going with this video at this particular stage myself. So we'll see how it goes. So let's just whip off this body and I'll show you what's going on with the inside of this car. So here we are. Here's the inside of the car, and let's just pull out this. And that's another thing I've noticed. This motor isn't actually clipped into this chassis. It's actually held in by the actual body, which is, well, I suppose it's not really a problem, is it? So here we are. Well, let's just move all this completely out of the way, because we don't really need to have it there for now. So these are these horrendous front wheels. I mean, that is so bad, and such a weird way of making a slot car these days. There's actually no reason for it. Nobody else makes flippy floppy front wheels. It's just an idea that's long since had its time. So the back end is absolutely fine. It's not too much of a problem at all. Although this car is geared so fast. This car drives far too quickly. Now I run Crow Valley at about 80% power, which works out to be approximately 10.5 volts. This car has to be run around at 65% of my available power, because 80% that I normally run on is just too fast. This motor is wildly out of sync with this chassis. So it'll be interesting to see how much quicker or how much more voltage I can run once we get this car running properly. Maybe we can run it closer to 70% or 80% and actually use the speed that this car has got, because if we can, this thing's going to be a rocket ship. Anyway, so that's the chassis all in there. Very floppy front axle, which we will address in this video. So here is the body here. Obviously we've got really heavy glass and a really rather heavy interior. So now there's two different cars going on, or two different bodies. The standard Mini that doesn't have the wide arch doesn't have this bar across the back. Now this car with the wheel arches, if you glue in these wheel arches, you can actually utilize this crossbar as the body mount. But with the standard width car, you can't really do that, because you don't have the wheel arches and therefore this crossbar. So if you do this conversion to a non-wide body car, I'll put a picture just here and I'll show you what I've done to a standard width car. And all that is 2 pieces of UPVC angle, which you can buy from any DIY shop. You can buy 15mm angle, 15 by 15, and you just cut a piece off. You mark where the light bar is on the inside of the body, draw a pencil line, and then make sure you glue your UPVC angle above that line so that they don't interfere with the light bar. And then when you put the chassis on, you drop a cocktail stick with a bit of paint through those back holes, and you put your dot on your 2 UVPC plastic arms that are now sticking into the body, and that gives you your screw points. Drill those to about 1.7mm, and then you can drill those out, and then you can use those as your body mount. So I won't address that again. That's what I've just explained it to you, and the picture, like I say, is just there. So onwards with this particular car. So there is the wheel arches that I've just taken out, and we'll take out the body as well. And there we are. So there is the body. Absolutely fantastic detail. Really, really nice. They've done a really good job. Scalextric really do make a great interior. It's a pity they're just so heavy. So that's the interior. Now the glass, there's two types of glass I've noticed, or at least two types. In this Mini, my Mini, that glass is one piece. Now that is an absolute nightmare to get out of this car, because they flush fit the glass and the glass is pushed in so tight into that body I can't get it back out. And because it's one piece, it all wants to spring and it can't be compressed and taken out easily. So what I've had to do is I've had to get a Dremel with an edge cutter and just cut across here so that I can get the back screen out. And once the back screen comes out, you can then get the front screen out. So forgive me if I stumble here a little bit. Oh no, actually it's come out quite easily. So there is the rear screen, and then the other screen then comes out relatively easily. You've got to squeeze the back and then come to the front and then squeeze the back again, back and forth, and it will eventually, if I can just coax it out, bear with. There you go. Right, you can see how difficult that was, and I've actually cut the glass in half. So imagine how difficult that would be if that was one piece. Now the funny thing is, the standard width car, the car without all these arches, that's actually got a two-piece glass as well. So I don't know which came first, the two-piece glass or the single-piece glass, but either way. So I've now got basically my version of the non-wide arch car, which is a two-piece glass. Anyway, that's another little oddity between my car and the other car. Anyway, so we've now got a nice clean body ready to start with. Anyway, so that's the car itself. So let's show you the parts that I've got that I've made and that I'm actually going to put in this car. Okay, so the first set of upgrade parts for this car. Now I may or may not fit these wheels. I'm not entirely sure yet what direction I'm going to go with this build. But either way, I've got these Pendle Slot 10-inch wheels and tyre set that fit this car 100% perfectly. They are exactly the same size as the Scalextric's wheels and tyres, and these Pendle Slot tyres grip like mad. Now I have a suspicion that the Scalextric's ones might also grip reasonably well as well, but there's something so out of round with mine, it's hard to know what it's doing. It's just jumping around like a kangaroo. So these Pendle Slot wheels and tyres would solve the problem in its entirety. So we've got a set of those to hand, and what direction we take I'm not entirely sure. So the next thing I've got are these beautiful 3D printed Pendle Slot Racing 10-inch wheel inserts. Now these are mini light inserts, and again I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to use them. I think I am, I'm just not sure. But these are beautiful little things. They're very nicely printed, and they will really look the part, and they fit perfectly inside their 10-inch wheel. Now I think that they would look pretty good. However, I'm also a bit of a fan of the standard wheel as well. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. I might turn these wheels into inserts. I don't really know. Or I might paint these mini light wheels red and pop those in and then leave the outer rim in silver, because that might look quite nice. Because I think actually these wheels look a bit much all red. So I think these mini lights painted red with a silver rim might actually give it a little bit of a cosmetic break with that silver rim. I think it might look quite cool. Again, we'll work that out when we get there. But these are the Pendle Slot inserts, and they're really nice. So next up, I've got myself a driver's head. Now this was because I had the opportunity and I got some rubber and resin. So I've actually taken one of the original Scalextric's heads, or I don't know if it is Scalextric's, I think it is, but whatever it is, someone might be able to tell me in the comments. I think it might be a Scalextric's head, I'm not entirely sure, but I copied it into resin anyway. So I've got one of those to hand. I don't need to use anything from stock. So we're going to be fitting that resin head. But normally what you would do is you would just decapitate your normal driver, and then you can be getting on with the normal head. But I want to leave my options open because I can. So I've cast up another head. It's pretty much exactly the same size, and it'll do the job for me. So we got a resin head. And of course, we're going to fit a Slotting Plus guide like we always do. And my conversion kit is actually set up for a Slotting Plus guide, although others will fit, I'm sure. Okay, so half of the tuning kit for this car. The vacuum formed interior and glass. Now this is a one-piece glass, as you can see, and all the windows are embossed into it, and it fits into the car perfectly. I've handmade it from scratch to fit inside the body shell. So that's the glass there. Now this glass weighs about 1 gram, so it's quite a bit lighter than the standard glass, although really the standard glass isn't all of the problem with this car. Most of the problem is in that piece there. And to solve that problem, I've made these two interiors. Now this is the single driver version, obviously, and this is the rally version, and it's got the 2 wheels in the back of it, exactly the same as the Scalextric rally version as well, and we got the 2 drivers. Now for complete openness, this interior was actually taken from my mould that I used for the classic 1970s Scalextric Mini, and all I've done is I've narrowed it down and extended the rear parcel shelf. And obviously Scalextric got their measurements right back in the day as well as now, because with just a little tiny tweak, this 40-year-old master effectively fits the brand new Mini 100% perfectly. It's a little bit of extra on the parcel shelf and a little bit narrower, and it basically fits straight in, no problems at all. So that's the rally interior, 2 drivers, 2 spare wheels, and obviously we got our single driver there. Now these parts here are all available on my website, Swift16, and there's a link to the sale page right there, and also down below in the video description. So the next part we're going to fit in this Mini is this axle, and it's a solid axle, and it's going to live right in there. And the way we're going to fit that is we're going to use this. Now this is the part that I've made to fit into the Mini so that we can take a solid axle, and it's not 3D printed, it's carved and made by hand and then cast by hand. I don't do 3D printing, I don't understand it. I've got more flexibility with my fingers, I believe. So we've got the little Swift16 or SwiftSlots logo there, and we've got the recess for where the front axle sits. We've also got a blank hole here that's blanked top and bottom, so that you've got a good start top and bottom to fit your guide. Now that hole there is 3.5mm, so it will need drilling out, and I've left it like that because it gives you the most amount of options for a guide. I like to run the Slotting Plus guides, and if you drill that out to 3.5mm, 3.6mm, and then ream it out, you'll get a Slotting Plus guide in there, no problems at all. But I've left options open, so I haven't drilled it. So that is going to go in the front of this car, and it sits right in there, right in front of the motor mount, and it locates down over these body posts just here. Now, there is a little bit of surgery that needs to go onto the chassis, but it's very, very easy to do because it's all been marked out for us by Scalextric very, very conveniently. So that's what we need to do with this car. We need to fit this and the lightweight interior into it, and possibly some alloy wheels. So that said, let's get to the bench and let's turn this car into a proper little racing car. Okay, so let's start by fitting this glass. Now the way that I like to fit my glass is I like to cut out a square out the roof, and I use that square so that I can put the silver foil tape on the underside, and I can use that square to stick through to the body and then push it down really hard. So as you've seen, I've just marked out that hole there with a Sharpie, and what I'll do is I'll just now use that as a guide to run my scalpel and cut it out as cleanly and as squarely as I can. And it's important to leave a little bit of space on the side of the underside of this glass so that you've got somewhere for the foil tape to purchase to. So that is what you need to do just there. Cut out a square just like that, and you end up with a hole in your roof. Then get your foil tape and just lay it on the body and work out roughly how much you need, and cut off a chunk, and then you can trim it back from there. Now this foil tape is just ordinary foil tape that you can buy for putting up insulation board. You can get it from any DIY shop, really, any decent DIY shop you can get it from. So all you do is you just chop it down until you get a nice fitting piece. It's just a little bit smaller than the underside of the roof, basically like that. And then you can just cut down the width as well, to just a little bit longer than the underside of the roof. Somewhere around there is fine. And what I like to do, just to make the job nice and neat, is remove the corners, and that makes a really neat job. And then the next tricky job is just peeling back this tape, but it can be quite tricky. So if I just take that paper off there. Now another little trick, if you lay the foil tape down, foil tape side, and hold the foil and peel back the paper, you won't get the foil tape all rolling up. So that's what will happen if you don't hold the corner, it'll roll up. Then what I also like to do is put the foil tape on the end of my tweezer like that, and I drop the tweezer through, and then I just lower the foil tape down, and I can see exactly where that foil tape is landing and get it exactly in the right place. And once it's there, just hold it, run it around a little bit and hold it in place, and just roll the tweezer off, and that ensures that you get the foil tape in exactly the right place, and you'll end up with that. So what you now need to do is just trim. Maybe I should have done this the other way around, but never mind, here we are. Just trim off the excess of the roof all the way around, or the side piece here, and you want to leave yourself about 5mm of plastic. It's not wildly important, so just like that, just to trim it all down, get it all reasonably neat and tidy like that. And then you should simply be able to drop the glass into the body. Small window at the back, large window at the front. And you just pop him in, and he'll clip into place just like that, and all the glass will clip in, and it'll all sit in perfectly. Just make sure the sides are all nicely seated exactly where they should be, and the front as well. And then you can just push your finger in there and rub it in. And then I got myself a cotton earbud, and you just even it all out on the inside, get it all inside the creases, push it all in really tight, and that will hold the glass very securely. And you should, if you've done it right, should end up looking like that, and the glass is all in perfectly. Now you will end up with a little bit of a lip here, so all you do is you get your scalpel, and you can go to one side, and then you can just go in the end, cross like that, and then you can take that piece out like that, and that's the back end all tight in as well, and that is your glass completely fitted. As easy as that. So the next job is to fit your interior. Now it's pretty similar to the glass fitting in as much as you have to cut the bottom off. Leave yourself a reasonable amount of plastic. It's not wildly important to cut it all nice and tight, you don't really need to. You can run around the bottom of that as well and chop off the bottom. Now the only thing I would advise is coming up at the back and coming across at the back as well, as tight as you want to really, and then cut back down at an angle like that, because you need to allow for the back wheels. And what you will now find is that the glass, or the interior, sorry, will fit straight in like that. Absolutely no problems whatsoever. And the reason why we leave a little bit of the side pieces is because once we've painted this interior, you want to be able to put some more tape on the side, but let's worry about that in a moment. So let's get to painting this interior. So the way you paint this interior is you get a piece of Scotch-Brite pad, and you just scuff the top side of the body. Just take off the shine, and once you've done that, give it a light coat of primer. Primer in a can is absolutely fine, only a light coating. You just need to get some primer down, and then just paint the interior with whatever colours you've got to hand. I like to use Warhammer paints. I find them very good, Warhammer acrylic paints, but you could use Humbrol, or you could use anything you want to get the colours that you want. So here's my interior all painted up, and as you can see, I put in some vinyl seat belts as well, just for a little bit of extra detail. So now we need to get this interior into the body, and for that I also use foil tape. So a little tip for you when you're taking backing off of foil tape is to, once you get the corner started, hold the foil down with your nail and peel the paper off flat against the table, and that means that you don't have your foil tape all scrolling up and becoming a problem. So once you've got your backing off, you can slip the foil tape down the side of the interior just like that, and then just gently tack it on. I use a cotton earbud to just help it on its way. So that's one side done, and then I roll it over like that so that the side is well away. We'll do exactly the same to the other side, just like that, so you've got nothing's touching the sides as much as you can help it. Then you can pop your interior into your car. I like to push it right to the very back first and get it over that little hook, and then come to the front and then look at the front of the car and make sure it's all going in nice and square and you're happy with it. Check on the back as well, make sure it's all up. Spend some time just getting it level and perfect. And once you've got the body or the interior all nice and where you want it, just run your cotton earbud down the side of the silver foil tape and then bond the two parts together. And there we are. That's the interior all in place, looking very neat. It's worth spending a few minutes or a few moments just getting the interior completely level, because you don't really want a wonky driver looking out through the window. You want them to look as nice and flat as you can. Try and make sure the rear parcel shelf is nice and level with the bottom of the window. Just worth spending a bit of time on it. And when you've got it all in place, you just push down the silver foil tape with your cotton earbud. Make sure it's all nicely pushed down, and if you need to trim where the rear arches are, you can do that as well. Okay, so I addressed the situation with the standard car where you lose your body mounts because the interior is not in there, by gluing on those UPVC angles on the back. So this particular wide arch version is a little bit different. So the wide arch just simply clips into the body just like that, and then you line up the tampo printing or the decal on the body like that and get it perfect, and that's great. And you got the body mounts here, or at least the holes that the body mounts would have been into when you fitted the body. So those two holes there are actually too big to take a thread, because they're not designed to take a thread. They're actually designed for the screw to pass through into the threads above it. However, there's two different ways of turning this into a body mount. One is to line the hole with a little bit of super glue and then a little bit of activator, so you close that hole up, and then you can use the screw to just screw through the super glue, and that works really well. That's a trick that I use when my body mount holes wear out on my racing cars. I just line them with a little bit of super glue, just damp super glue on a cocktail stick, and that will close the hole up and you could use the threads again. Or you could simply glue a piece of plastic card on the top of this and then drill your holes through so that your screw can tap into the plastic card above. Now I'm actually going to elect to use the old super glue trick in the hole, because I don't think that this needs an awful lot of closing up to turn this mount into an actual body mount without having to stick on any plastic card. So I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue in that hole there, take a little bit out of that one, put a little bit in that one, back and forth, just making sure. There we are. Right, so now I've got a nice line, and then I'm going to pop a spot of kicker on each hole. Move the body before I get a big dollop of super glue on that. So there we are. So that is now closed up. So if I pop the screw in there now, I should find that I can now use that as, yes, there we are. That's gone in there really, really nicely. There's a nice bit of resistance on that now. That has now turned that hole into a body mount. So we've got that far. Now what we need to do is we now need to glue this rear wheel arch into the body so that we can now use this as the body mount. So like I say, it goes in there, and just line up the decal, make sure it's clipped in as well on the back there. Right, there we are. And this side as well. And you can see that the decals are lined up. So
what you now need to do is put a bit of glue in the wheel arch. Now I'm wondering, actually in hindsight, it might be easier to put a little bit of glue on the wheel arch first, because it's not fully seating home, so you should be able to get away with it. So I'm going to try that. So a little bit of super glue there first, but you're going to have to be fairly accurate when you fit the wheel arches in, otherwise it'll grab too soon and it'll become a problem for you. So holes at the back of the body, and then line up the wheel arch accurately like that, and then hold that side and come around the other side and make sure this one is exactly the same. Make sure it's well and truly up into the arch and the decals are lining up just like that. Come around and double check. I believe that's spot on. Right, so I'm just going to hold that for a moment, and then that should be the bodywork finished. Okay, so now we've got the body finished, now we can turn our attentions to the chassis. And let's start by just removing some of the parts we don't need, like the axle, and also pull out these wires from the front end, just like that. They will pull out, and then you can reuse these wires without having to replace them if you're careful. So here is our basic chassis. So now let's get these front stub axles out, and that is just a simple case of grabbing them with a pair of pliers, and it's not necessarily easy. Right, okay, let's change plan. Let's take the guide out first, that will give us more access. Right, I'm not going to lie, that put up a fight. Now this is the second one of these cars that I've done, and the first one I could grab hold of the ends of those stubs, those axles, and with a bit of a wiggle they would come off easily. Mine put up a major fight, so I ended up having to use my very strong side cutters and get in there and actually cut that axle clean in half and get the axles out like that. But nevertheless, the wheels are now out and the chassis is now liberated from its front wheels. So what we now need to do is we now need to cut away this entire tongue that the original guide was on. And it's very, very easy to do. All you do is you take a Dremel and you follow the curvature that's already there. You don't need to take off any more than what you can see there. And once we've done that, you also want to take away a little bit of front of this chassis as well. Just like that. It really is that simple. Quick Dremel and a quick clean up with a scalpel and get that inner curve nice and smooth. Now some chassis that I've worked on have got some lettering on here, and if yours has got some lettering on it and mine doesn't, you just need to scrape that lettering away with something like a chisel or a scalpel or anything you like, just to make sure that that base there is nice and flat. I can actually feel on this particular chassis, I've also got a lip on mine as well. So these chassis are different right across the board. So I'm going to take away that lip as well to make sure that it doesn't interfere with my fitment of my part, because I want a nice flat surface for my component to go onto. So I'm just going to take away that as well. There we are. That's pretty much gone. Just like that. There. Right. Now that is gone. So then all we need to do is get the component and literally drop it straight in like that, and that is it. It's done. As simple as that. Nice and neat and tidy. Like I say, we need to remove a little bit off the front, but I'll do that in a second once I put my guide into the hole and I know exactly how much to take away. So what we now need to do to get this in finally is scrape up the bottom of this flat surface here with a bit of sandpaper or something, just to key up the surface. Maybe not that Scotch-Brite. Okay, so once you've scratched up the surface of the guide holder and you've scratched up the surface of the chassis, you're technically now ready to glue this guide in, and it fits simply just like that. Now what I will do first before I glue mine in is drill this hole out here to 3.5mm and then ream it so that my Slotting Plus guide fits, and get that part of the fitment done first. So there we are, that's the fitment of the guide all done and turning very smoothly using my SwiftSlots Slotting Plus reamer. So once we got that, we can now think about offering the whole guide into the car and pop them in like that, pop them in like that, and now we can see exactly where the chassis is getting in the way. And as an initial cut, we could take away most of the chassis around about sort of there, chop it away, and then come back and have another offer up and see where we're actually fitting. There we are. Right, the guide is now fitting with absolutely perfect clearance. Okay, so now you've got the guide holder fitted to the chassis and we know the guide clears. Make sure the guide holder is fully pushed down in the chassis, and then test fit your axle. Make sure your axle is nice and free to move. If it's a little bit stiff, it's probably because the little bits of chassis on the ends there are just encroaching in its path. And once you're happy that everything is all correct, you can then go ahead and glue into the chassis. And you can do that just by putting a couple of nice drops of super glue on the chassis, pop it back in, and then give it a good old press down. Make sure it's fully home, and then let the super glue set. Okay, so now your front axle guide holder is now all glued in place. We can now think about putting the front axle on. And I've cut my standard axle down to 47.5mm. Now, I've elected to use the Pendle slot wheels and tyres in this build, and here is the reason. Here is the back axle, and here is the standard Scalextric tyre. And as you can see, it falls on and falls off these wheels like nothing. There's just nothing holding that tyre on, and that could have been why this car tramps so hard on the track with a decent grip surface, because as you accelerate, it's going to ruck that tyre up like that and potentially start slipping on the rim or driving over its own sort of ruck and so on. So unless you glued and trued these tyres, you're going to get problems, I think, with these tyres being such a loose fit on that wheel. Now you could definitely glue and true these tyres on. However, I found that the Pendle slot rubber is actually far superior to the standard Scalextric rubber, and I believe I'll get better grip and more progressive handling with the Pendle slot tyre, even though the Pendle slot tyre is a little bit narrower than the Scalextric tyre. So that's my logic for choosing the Pendle slot wheels and tyres. And obviously I know the wheels are perfectly round because they're turned aluminium, and they're also an excellent fit on the rim, and I won't need to glue them on. So that's the reasoning for that. So as I say, my axle is 47.5mm long, and I've found with a 2.5mm spacer, and I've gone ahead and I've made these spacers because they're very specific to my build, unless you're following this build exactly. With a 2.5mm spacer and an axle at 47.5mm long, that's the perfect width for this car. And when we put it on the body, it's absolutely perfect. Let me put it that way. It's absolutely perfect. They're beautifully flush to the outside and they fit like that. So that's where I'm going with my particular build. However, if you wanted to stick with the standard kit wheels, the axles will fit quite happily on a standard axle with a little bit of glue. There won't be any problems with that at all. You can do that absolutely, and then you can fit them straight on like that and they'll be absolutely fine. However, you will need to reduce this axle down a further 4.5mm to make your final length of axle 43mm exactly, and I believe that will fit this type of wheel on this particular body without any problems. Now obviously the non-wide arch Mini, that'll all be different, but for the wide arch Mini you want the axle at 43mm. So let's go ahead and pop this axle together, and then we can move on to the next stage. Okay, so I've just recorded a large segment of going down a huge rabbit hole which I hadn't expected to go down. However, let's step back from that a moment and stick with the job in hand, and we'll come back to the back axle, the rabbit hole, in a moment. So simply, back axle back in the car, clipping back into the chassis so we can get the chassis on 4 wheels. Work out what braid you're going to use. In my case, it's 0.2 mil. Work out what spacer you're going to need underneath your front guide. In my case, it's a 1mm spacer, and you can fit that spacer, and then you can fit the braid that you need into your guide. Put the guide onto the mount, put the screw in, put your motor back, and button up the car, and you're all ready to go. So just to show you how that guide fits with my spacer on, which is the maximum height that it will be in the car, get it all lined up there, and you can see it clears the body absolutely beautifully. There's no problems whatsoever, and from the top it will clear where the wire goes, no problems at all. Now I do know that in the non-wheel arch car you may need to take away a little bit of plastic on the valance, but it's got a number plate behind it and you can't really see it, and you don't need to take much away anyway, so it's not a problem. But in the case of this wheel arch car, because they do seem to be a little bit different, that will work absolutely fine, and there's plenty of space there for the wires to return back. I hope you can see that. So that's all good. So as far as the lightweight interior is concerned, that's all done. It looks great. And as far as fitting the front guide is concerned and the front axle, that's all done, and it all works absolutely brilliantly. So the rabbit hole. Now I have discovered that this back axle is too narrow if you want to use a pendle slot alloy wheel. Because the alloy wheel is shallower, it's nowhere near as deep as a standard plastic wheel. However, the standard plastic wheels do actually fit on a standard axle if you were to glue them on, same as the front. That's not the problem at all. The problem comes if you want to put a pendle slot racing alloy wheel onto the standard axle like that. It's far too narrow. The car needs to be wider, or the rear track needs to be wider. Now I had just shown you in a segment that I won't be using now how to remove the knurling on a standard axle to bring this axle down to 2.38 mil to take your alloy wheel. And I won't do it again. Well, actually, yes, I will. I'll show you a little video just here of me machining down by hand the knurls on this axle, because this actual axle is the right size for a slot car axle. It's measuring at 2.27 there, but with the knurlings it comes out at about 2.5 mil, and you can pop it in the drill like you can see in that picture there, and you can actually use a file, and you can file down very gently and very slowly as it's spinning, and you can get that axle down so that it fits an alloy wheel absolutely perfectly like that, and it fits really, really well. But once I'd done that in that segment that I'm not going to use now, I discovered that the axle is far too narrow. So the rabbit hole that I'm now going to go down is fitting a standard axle into the back of this car. Sorry, I've just done another little U-turn there. I was going to use these pendle slot ABO1 brass bearings to go with my nice standard axle. And in the segment that I won't be showing you, I'd already worked out that these bearings don't quite fit in that holder there, so I was going to have to manipulate the plastic. But then it suddenly occurred to me, I don't need to jump through those hoops. The bearings that come with this car from Scalextric are perfectly good on a standard axle, and of course they already fit in the car because they came with it. So that's just saved me, and you potentially, a huge amount of trouble, and this job has just got a lot easier, in fact. So let me show you this rabbit hole that I discovered. Now, as we know, or as we might know, this car is far too fast. I have to run this car at 65%, and it's just ridiculous. Now, I've put this motor, this standard one that comes with the car, on my RPM meter, and it's coming out at 23,000 RPM, which is a bit strange because they're normally 20 or 25,000, but this is 23,000 RPM. Now, we have a selection of motors to choose from. We have the pendle slot racing 20,000 RPM motor, which would be perfect, and the shaft length is perfect, so that is an option to slow the car down. We've also got the Predator motor at 18,000 RPM. If you're lucky enough to live in America, you have this option, and this is a couple of thousand short of that one, so that would be even better. And then back to the UK, we also have this Pendle Slot Racing 16,000 RPM motor to use, and this is all to get the speed down a little bit, because we can't actually use this standard Scalextric axle because it's too narrow on a wide arch car if you want to use alloy wheels. So we have to use a standard axle, which means we have to now use an aftermarket gear. The standard Scalextric gear is 20 teeth. Now the standard pinion that comes with this motor is a 9-tooth pinion. So we got a 9-tooth on a 20-tooth gear running at 23,000 RPM. So if I just move this along a little bit, I will show you what I've written down. And that is this. So we've got a 20-tooth gear, which is the standard gear of the Scalextric, on a 9, gives you 2.22 to 1. At 23,000 RPM, gives you 10,360 RPM to the back wheels, which is, as we know, too fast. And I have to run my speed down at 65%. So if we run a 22-tooth gear, which is this all-slot gear, on a 9-tooth pinion, that gives you 2.44 to 1 at 16,000 RPM, which is the Penelope pit lane motor, gives you 6,557 RPM on the back wheel, which is approximately 4,000 RPM slower than the standard car. Also, that means I could probably turn my 65% power up to maybe 85%, and I think that would give me a much better usability for the car. Alternatively, we can go a bit slower and we can use the all-slot gear at 22 teeth on an 8-tooth pinion at 2.75 to 1 on the Penelope pit lane motor at 16k, and that will give us 5.818 RPM, roughly half of what the standard Scalextric motor gives us now. But I think that might be a little bit too slow. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to change direction quite dramatically on this car, and I'm going to use a 22-tooth all-slot gear, which is the smallest that I know of, on a 9-tooth pinion in brass, and that will give me quite a bit slower on the back wheels in theory. So the parts I'm going to use for that are these slotted pinions. So it is part number P1559015, and it's a 1.5mm hole, and it's a 9-tooth, and it's for inline motors. So it's a 5.5mm in diameter. But the next rabbit hole, it doesn't matter about the diameter, because this particular motor shaft, and it's the same for the standard one, but I'll use this one because it's easier to show you, doesn't actually reach the back of that motor anyway, the gear, to keep that gear in line like that. You can see that there's a problem just here. It doesn't reach. Now in the standard car, that's not a problem because the wheels are here, and the wheels actually limit the side float of the axle. Normally that shaft there goes into the gear slot there, and that's what limits most slot cars. But in the case of this car, because the shaft is so far back, it doesn't quite reach the axle. So they've limited it properly using all the surfaces that are available to them. However, because we're now going to fit a wider axle, and also the wheels are going to be further out, we're going to create gaps on either side. Now those gaps are a problem because now the axle can move back and forth, and we don't have the motor engaging into the gear to stop that. So we're going to have to put a brass spacer either here or over here to limit the sideways travel. So that's the other rabbit hole we're going to go down. But in terms of fitting the glass and the interior, that's job done. We can move on with that. And in terms of fitting the front guide holder and setting it all up, that's all done. We've now moved on. So this part of the video now is going down a rabbit hole that I hadn't intended to go down. But where we're going to find ourselves, we're going to find ourselves with a much nicer motor that's more in keeping with the car, much higher quality components on the back end, and hopefully a car that will run a lot nicer. Now there's one more very small rabbit hole that I need to show you, and that is the fact that in this particular wide arched car, and it isn't the case on the standard width car, the motor is actually held in by the interior. Now that's a problem because we've changed the interior. So you've got a choice when you come to fit this car back together again. We can either put a strap of brass over the top and a couple of small screws, that's one option, or you could simply glue the motor in with a bit of epoxy and just stick him straight in. Now the problem with sticking the motor in, obviously we can't take it out very easily, so that might not be an option that we want. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this when I get there. I'll probably end up putting a strap over the top of it, but that's for a section in a moment. So let's just get this back end all set up on this car with all the nice components, and then we'll worry about getting the motor actually in. So what you're going to see me do now is this gear is a little bit bigger and it's just a little bit interfering with all the bits around it. So I'm going to Dremel some clearance around there and get this gear in. So let's just Dremel this chassis to get this gear in, and then I'll come back to you. So here we are, down the rabbit hole and out the other side. We've now got some really high quality running gear in the back of this car, with the exception of the Scalextric standard bearings, but they're absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. And as you can see, I've had to chomp out the chassis a little bit to make it all fit, but it doesn't look too bad from the other side. There's nothing really outstanding about it. It all looks very, very normal, and it's very, very smooth to turn as well. And what I've done here is I've added 115 thou shim between the bearing and the back of the gear, and that lands that 1.5mm shaft slap bang in the middle of that gullet there that receives the standard motor shaft, but obviously doesn't quite reach. And as you can see, it all works absolutely perfectly. Nothing is a problem. I say to take the motor out, if we pop out that bearing there, you can see the standard axle, standard proper axle, nice bearings and everything else, and my brass spacer. And this is how much I've removed from the chassis. So there's a little bit, there's a chunk taken out the post there, but nothing too bad, and it all looks very, very normal. To be honest, there's still plenty of plastic there, and what we've ended up with is a really, really high quality back end. And this isn't something that I actually envisaged doing, but we're here where we are now, so that's that. So if you want to just change the straight up guide, you can do that, or if you want to put the lightweight interior in it to get more performance, you can do that. Or you can do what I've just done and go the whole 9 yards and really go to town in it and put a whole back end in it as well. Plenty of options. Right, let's cut some lead, let's get this motor in, let's solder it all up, get the guide on, and then go and play with it on the track.
And there we are. I think we can all agree that my SwiftTune Mini has been swiftly tuned. So from a mid 82 down to a mid 57. That's not bad. Now, to be honest with you, I was hoping for a little bit more, but that brings this card directly in line with all the other minis that I've tuned from Scalextric previously in other videos. So I'm quite happy with it. And I did experiment with putting a bit more lead in it on the back end just to try and keep the back end in check. Didn't really work out, because when you get to a critical point with lead, it starts working against you, and there's a balance to the sweet spot. And this sweet spot for this card does seem to be exactly how I had it off the bench at about 78 grams. Slight caveat there, I did actually put an extra 3 grams over the front axle, so it took it from about 75, 76 grams to the 78 grams that you saw in the video there. Just needed a little tweak and then it all comes in strong. However, how did she run? Well, that's the biggest difference. Although I was expecting a lot more in terms of speed, I wanted sort of a 55 or something, but didn't quite get there. But how does it drive? It drives way better than it did before. It doesn't jump and skit around. It's a little bit back endy as it is now. Could probably do with something a bit grippier on the back end if you really want to go fast. But it's smooth, it's quiet, it doesn't skit about. If you watch the first track run, it's jumping all over the place. Doesn't do that anymore. It's just planted, predictable and smooth. And that 16,000 RPM motor was spot on. I'm now running this car on Crow Valley at about 90% power. At only 90% because I was trying to get a really fast time and I wanted more punch through the infield. But you can actually turn it down to 80% and she runs really, really nicely. The speed and the power is exactly matched to this car with that 16,000 RPM. Like I say, if you turn it up to 90%, like I've done with some Scalextric cars, she runs really well with a lot of extra power. And 100%, yeah, that's quite a lot at 100%, but it's still not overpowered. You can still drive it on 100%, not like before where 100% was just ridiculously too much. So that motor and the gearing in this car are really nicely matched to this chassis now. So remember, if you want to do the conversion yourself to this wide-bodied Mini, the standard Mini, or the 1275 GT, I sell the vacuum formed glass and 3 types of interior to suit each of those cars, and also that guide mount on the front to bring the guide forwards and be able to put a solid front axle in the car, so as you dive into the corners, the front end is well supported. And those upgrades really do seem to have made a big difference, along with the slower motor and some more favourable gearing. So hopefully you've enjoyed this content, and if you have, maybe you'll subscribe, and if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.